Welcome to the Do Good X podcast, a sanctuary from the entrepreneurial grind. Hosts Kimberly Danielle and Stephen Lewis, advocates for impactful entrepreneurship, guide you on the path where purpose meets business. Join us to slow down, reconnect, and explore the challenges of under-resourced entrepreneurs, uncovering the unique journey of building businesses that make a difference. Now, your hosts.
Welcome to the Do Good X podcast. I'm Stephen Lewis. I'm a catalyst for positive change in communities and business. And for more than 2 decades, I've inspired leaders and entrepreneurs to live and work on purpose with intention, faith, and a commitment to their well-being. And I'm joined today with my co-host, Kimberly Danielle. Kimberly, it's good to see you.
Hello, Stephen. Good to be here with you. I am Kimberly Danielle, and I am a community builder, a communication strategist, and a coach who comes from generations of faith-driven entrepreneurs and leaders who believe that our purpose should drive us to contribute to the common good. And I'm like cheesing right now. I know if you're listening to the audio format, I'm just like cheesing right now because Steve and I, we just had some bloopers starting out this episode. And I'm still giggling in the inside right now. For those of you who have been doing podcasts or some type of video content, I'm sure you definitely understand, but it's good to laugh. It's good to laugh. But this episode that we have today, I'm excited about this episode because typically we primarily focus on stories and insights from entrepreneurs or other leaders in the entrepreneurial field, whether that's investors or at business schools or mentors. But today, I want to give you all the opportunity to just learn a little bit more about us. And particularly in this episode, I'm going to flip the script. And though I am a co-host, I am going to be your host because I have some questions for Stephen. So I will say just generally, Stephen is the initial catalyst for the work of Do Good X and really the reason why we are here today. And so I'm very grateful that I had the ability and the opportunity to join him in this work. He is a person of deep faith. He's engaged in service, has a background in banking, is an organizational executive, leads a 70-plus-year-old nonprofit. He is a healer and so much more. And so I have the gift of co-conspiring with him to support, inspire, and journey with underestimated entrepreneurs who want to make a positive impact in communities through their businesses. So thank you, Stephen, for joining me as the co-host, but now as my guest.
Thank you, Kimberly. It's good to be with you.
So your work is deeply rooted in purpose-driven businesses. Can you share how you discovered your purpose and how it led you to co-founding and creating Do Good X?
I would say in terms of discovery, it is always unfolding, right? So I don't think you say, oh man, I got this thing and this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. I think discovery is episodic. And so it's always kind of unfolding moment by moment. But I think I've just kind of followed the breadcrumbs, I would say, of life and be open to what makes my heart sing, how I feel called to serve in the world. And in many ways, it's really been around this intersection of meaning and purpose. My work is about, I think, really trying to help people to live and lead their lives purposefully. And I think in many ways, it's because I recognize that everybody wants their life to matter. I haven't met anyone who says, I don't want my life to matter. And so how do we help people do that? How do we help people live out their deepest longings? And so in many ways, as it relates to this particular conversation, when I was, a young, early 20-something-year-old, I worked in banking and finance. I was in this kind of, junior executive kind of program. And I remember saying, man, there's got to be more to life than climbing the corporate ladder to, make a lot of money, get married, having a home and a family, growing old and die. Like, I got to believe that my life has greater significance in that. And that began a whole journey of kind of exploring how do you do that? And not just individuals, but how do you help communities live out of their deeper sense of purpose, how they're called to be and participate in the welfare of the larger community. And so I have found business to be a catalyst to help make that happen, whether it be for profit or a nonprofit. Businesses can be a force for good. Now, yes, there's a lot of negative things that are said about it, and all types of legalities and stuff that you see in the news and that type of thing. But businesses have the opportunity to be a force for good. And they can be a force for good because its leaders and the team of people in which its mission and its values are organized around have the capacity to be inspiration, to inspire the kind of good that we want to see in the world. And so I've always believed that it requires, when you think about the good that we want to see, it requires some level of scale. And what I have seen is businesses that can scale good work in the world, whether it be, my participation in a middle class, upperly mobile religious community, and the ways in which, Black and brown folks pull their resources together, purchase land, build buildings to the honor of their God and spirit, and then to do good work in the community and to use the resources that they donate to these communities and actually do good charitable as well as justice oriented work. That's one example. I've worked for Bank of America, which was Nations Bank at one time, and how it helped build up that downtown area of Charlotte. And so, where they've been involved in the community and have brought commerce and all these types of things. And so there's a lot of businesses that good. Patagonia is an example of that in terms of the clothing wear, or you look at Ben and Jerry's. Like, organizations have the capacity to do good in the world. It doesn't always have to be extractive. It doesn't have to always be about, taking from the community, but it can work alongside community and do good work. Not always, but it has the capacity to do that. And a large part of that is dependent upon the people who lead those businesses and their imagination to actually do something that I think inspires us to live out our greatest values and our deep longings for what it is that we want to see in the world, but also for future generations to come.
So, speaking of, making an impact, these businesses, like you mentioned, Patagonia, Ben and Jerry, they're providing solutions that fill a gap that exists,
Right.
or and they're also making an impact in specific communities. What specific gap led to the creation of Do Good X, and how do we seek to fill that gap?
Yeah. So I think, like you, myself, we've all been wide-eyed and idealist young adults who want to make the world a better place. And I think in every generation, you have um, young leaders who are fed up. Enough is enough. They want to make the world a better place. And so they learn from their predecessors, their elders, and their ancestors, and they march and they organize and they protest the things that are wrong in the world in hopes to actually, shake down political and business foes to actually, to open their hands to be more generous to the communities that they're working on behalf of, or hand in hand to create the kinds of communities that they want to live in. And part of the question I began to ask is, so what's after activism? What's after protests? Or maybe to say, what's in concert with it? These things are important. But how do we build the kinds of new communities and organizations in the 21st century that instill the values that we care about, that become the motivating factors by which we make decisions as an organization about how we actually going to conduct our work in the world. And so I just feel that, that the next generation, the next move for them beyond kind of activism and organizing and protesting is construction. How do we construct new businesses and communities that really live out our deepest values and love and care for one another so that we all might win, so that everybody might thrive and succeed, and to participate in a community that cares for us all. And so Duke at X, I think, kind of, is was energized by that idea to say that, private citizens throughout history were young adults, whether it be the civil rights or the women's suffrage movement. These were young leaders who were, basically pricking the consciousness of our country to say, we can do better. We don't have to just accept the world as it is. We can actually create the world as it could be. And I think part of what I am inviting through Do Good X is to ask people, how might we create the world as it could be through the kinds of organizations that we want to see in this 21st century that will help in stealing the good that we want to see in our communities and the broader world. That's intention. It requires construction. It requires building organizations that are grounded in deeply held values, and also organizations that are really thinking about what's the social good footprint that I want to leave. So you think about kind of carbon emissions, and we talk about like green emissions. And Do Good X, we're really talking about like what is the kind of social emissions, or what we're trying to emit socially that is valuably and mutually beneficial to the wider community. And so we really ask people to think about, what's your social footprint? What are the values that you're going to step out in the world in through your business? And then what is the legacy that you want to leave through your business that will be beneficial to those that come behind you in a new generation? And so Do Good X really comes out of that kind of fodder and idea, understanding that people of deep faith and values can do more than just the status quo. They can build new kinds of organizations in the marketplace, and to see that as their work of service or ministry, or what it is that they're called to be and do to help create this type of global community that we want to be a part of. And so Do Good X, I think is rightly named, is really asking, what is your X? X marks the spot. What is your X? What is your spot, your mark to actually do good in the world? And to know that you can actually do that in a very structured way through a for-profit or nonprofit or a B corporation, but you yourself can actually build the kind of organizations that will be a partner in the community to help shape that community in such a way that benefits and tends to the welfare of us all.
Let me ask you about your source of inspiration. So, who or what inspires your work with social entrepreneurs?
That's a good question. I've always been inspired by organizations that are making a profit and then they pay it forward into the larger community. So, I've always been fascinated by Ben and Jerry's story. Like, how in the world did these guys do what they did? And then Patagonia, you buy these, buy this clothing, it tears or whatever, you can get it fixed and that type of thing. Like, I've always been inspired by the ways people who built businesses that are holding financial returns and social impact together, and asking the question, why can't we do more of that? So those leaders, I think inspire me. I'm inspired by even folks like Steve Jobs. He had a mixed kind of record in terms of maybe how he treated his employees. But I was inspired by, him and his work and what he tried to do through his organization to create these beautifully designed kind of products and services that can help make our lives better. And I think they've gotten better in terms of, their production and supply chain and that type of thing, and have moved to more kind of, green and thinking about being, socially responsible in terms of, using recycled products and that type of thing. But what I love most about his work is, I think it was the 1997, 1998 marketing pitch that he did, said, these are for the crazy ones. And, he has these pictures of these great leaders who do all these, wonderful things. And he goes on to say in this particular marketing campaign that the people who, at least were the consumers of Apple's products, they're the crazy ones. But it's only the crazy ones who actually change the world. And again, in that kernel of that particular marketing piece, it is, I think, an ode and a reminder that businesses can actually change the world, that people can actually really change the world right where they are through their businesses, and that businesses can be a force for good. So he is another inspiration, I think, in that regards. But it's those kinds of organizations, I think. Pixar is another one. I mean, I love the way in which, here's these people who bring creativity and the arts on behalf of changing people's mindsets and hopefully, broaden people's imagination and bringing them into a world that they never imagined was possible. And so Pixar has a fascinating story about how they did all that through animation. But it's those kinds of organizations that have bring together the financial and the social impact, organizations who really create these kinds of instill people's imaginations to help them see what they could not imagine. The late Bell Hooks says, which you cannot imagine will never come into being. So how do we catalyze people's imagination to see anew what could be, not just what is? I think Steve Jobs and Pixar kind of lives out that spirit that Bell Hooks is kind of getting at. So it's those kind of organizations that really have shaped my own imagination and inspired me in the work that I want to at least seed with you and others through Duke at X.
I appreciate doing this work with you and you listeners. That's just a little snippet of Stephen's story, his what inspires him, and how we got to where we are today. And maybe at another time we'll get into a little bit more, but that's going to be it for now. Thank you so much for sharing with us, Stephen, and look forward to diving more into our stories and the stories of our guests in order to support underestimated, underrepresented entrepreneurs who are really trying to make an impact in our communities through their businesses.
Thank you, Kimberly.
So if you are tuning in and you want to connect with us and other entrepreneurs or change makers, make sure you go to dogoodx.org, and there you can find tips, tools, resources, and join our Do Good X LinkedIn community. And I would love to see you there. You can even shoot me a DM on LinkedIn and I will chat with you. I will respond because you are not in this alone. Stay tuned for our next episode. And until then, be well and do good.
Thank you for listening to the Do Good X podcast. To continue the conversation or access our resources, visit www.dogoodx.org. Join us again for conversations that will nourish your soul, ignite your dreams, and empower you to build an impactful business, one intentional step at a time. Until then, keep striving, thriving, and doing good.